Well, hi there, Strata Loungers. It's Bill Whittle in the wreckage of the Stratosphere Lounge after the rhetoric bomb is hit. And this is episode 81 of the fabulous Stratosphere Lounge, otherwise known as part 3 of the Liberal Tough Questions edition of the Stratosphere Lounge. And we will be knocking them down fast today. The reason we're going to knock them down fast is because, number one, we got a lot of them. Number two, we're going to knock them down fast today because for the first time in memory, probably 30 shows at least, I would say, at least that long. Your host is in a feral mood. I think is probably the best way to describe how I'm feeling today. Feral. This is one of those days where every single damn thing that I had to do today didn't go well, and there's a lot of stuff that's been taking a lot longer than I would have liked as sort of the background music to the amusing day. But I have to tell you, one of the things that I am going to do when I have enough money to conquer the world is I'm going to find out who invented the automated phone message system that are used by airlines and banks, and I'm going to beat that person to death with that red, white, and blue baseball bat kindly submitted by a fan right there in the background. That's the first thing I'm going to do. And then I'm going to go find every single phone bank that uses these things, and it's probably going to take me years. I'm going to smash those with that bat, too. Just that was the beginning. And it just went downhill from there. I mean, honestly, I was this close to just throwing the monitor through the window. I was this frustrated today. So, yeah, I think what's really part of it is I get to the point sometimes where I begin to realize just how vile our opponents are personally, just how vile they are. What vile people they are. Not just their philosophy, but how many of them are just personally vile, wretched, awful people. So we're going to just go ahead and knock them down as fast as we can today because I'm in the mood. So we're not going to have the normal kind of deep philosophical sort of background underpinning it. Get these lights right, or else this iPhone's going to go through the wall too. I'm telling you, nothing is beyond salvation today in this room. Yeah, well, it's really been one of those days, weeks, months, and years. And thank you, Wild Goose. That's why they invented booze. That's spectacular. I should have some on hand. Now today, for part 3, we're just going to go clobbering through these things. And I'm sorry if they're not as thoughtful or delicate as they normally are, because I usually like being a thoughtful and delicate guy. But today, I got the clue bat against the wall, and I'm ready to use it. So. Here we go. Oh, one thing before I forget. Due to a little traveling, I was out of town the last 2 weeks. Had a great time on both trips. I had last week. I was in Charlotte, and I was with some friends of mine. I should tell you this. I'll bring it up again next week when I'm in a better mood. But I do want to say I caught up with some people who were friends. One guy especially is really not just a friend. He's like my dad. He's certainly my big brother anyway. Hadn't seen him in 22 years. And it was just the greatest thing. I miss him terribly already, and I had the best time. I think in the next week or two, we have some pictures that we found that he had on a slide tray. He put a slide carousel, Kodak carousel on a slide projector, which is how we did all our media back in the days of the planetarium when I first met him. And there were slides of me when I was probably 14 years old, and I have to tell you, I saw a couple pictures of me working on some equipment, and I'll as soon as I get them, as soon as Phil sends them to me, I'm going to put them on the air because I'm fearless. There were a couple pictures of me at 14. I was a fairly cute-looking kid, I have to say, but honest to God, I look like I cut my own hair with pruning trimmers. And I actually think that at some point my mom must have said, "Do you want to use a mirror for that?" I said, "No, better by myself." And just unbelievable. But seriously, I have to tell you, there's some really cute pictures, and I do miss that trip very much. And the other, I miss those people very much. It was great to get back in touch with them. It's like I never left. And the second thing I'll say is that next week we'll have a big announcement for some work that's been going on behind the scenes by some really remarkable people concerning the show. And I would kind of promote it tonight, but it's not fully up yet. I think it'll be up next week. And besides, they deserve much better treatment and much better shout out than what they're likely to get tonight, because I'm just in a really I'm on my last nerve today. Okay, so anyway, with that said, thanks for the work you're doing back there behind the scenes, guys, and we'll get to you next week when we're in a better mood. So let's get through this. We've got like 4 or 5 pages of these things left, and I don't want to do a part 4. So let's get going, and then probably the faster we can knock them down, the better I like them. Louisa Anderson says, without government regulation, businesses would exploit workers and ruin the environment just for the love of money. Big corporations only care about money, not people. Why don't businesses care about people? That's a 2-part question. The first part is, without government regulation, businesses would exploit workers and ruin the environment just for the love of money. Part of that has some truth to it, which is why the way the left likes to argue everything is that they always like to take things to absolute madness. If you're in favor of guns, I guess you should be allowed to have your own nuclear weapons. If you are opposed to shutting down California's entire agricultural economy to save a fish this big, I suppose that means you just prefer that we just poured molten mercury down the throats of your children. Is that what you're saying, you rotten, awful conservatives? No. Liberals are not capable of gray reasoning or multi-value logic. They're only capable of this kind of childish sort of everything is great or everything sucks. So to answer the first part of your question, there are, in fact, important regulations that the government does provide that are necessary and that do a lot of good. And we've never said that there wasn't. And to say that we say that there wasn't is something that we call, in the world of rhetoric and discussion, a lie. It's a lie. Of course we believe in regulations. We believe in realistic regulations. I'm completely in favor of regulations on airline maintenance, for example. I'm not one of these people, and I'm not saying all libertarians are like this. I'm not saying most libertarians are like this. Some libertarians or objectivists will say that businessmen will patrol themselves because they don't want to be sued and they want to succeed in business. I think that's completely unrealistic. And I know most libertarians don't agree with that. But I'm in favor of regulations that affect the public safety in cases where the public is trusting somebody else to take care of their safety. If I get on a jet and it's got a company logo on the tail, I would like there to be regulations to make sure that that jet has been adequately maintained. I adequately maintain my airplane. I don't know that somebody else adequately maintains their airplane. And frankly, I don't care if that other person doesn't adequately maintain their own airplane, so long as it's only their airplane, that they're the only people flying their airplane. They want to fly an airplane that's never been maintained for 7 years. That's their business. I don't care. But if it turns out that it's for the public, yes, I'm in favor of airline maintenance regulations. I'm in favor of regulations that control the amount of toxics and poisons that go into the environment. Very, very important to do that. And all of these regulations, basically, they're fundamentally conservative regulations because the only people that go outside are conservatives. When liberals start talking about the environment, what do they know about the environment? They never leave outdoors. They've never been outdoors before, most of these people. So, yes, I am in favor of environmental regulations. I'm in favor of environmental regulations that prevent pouring toxic waste into rivers and so on and so on and so on. Why do businesses do that? They don't do it because they hate people. They do it because they can, because it's the easiest, cheapest way to do it. Well, okay, fair enough. But that should be stopped. We should have regulations in place for that. Let's get to the second part of this thing, because the second part is much more interesting to me. Big corporations only care about money, not people. Why don't businesses care about people? This is the thing that I don't know why we just not throw this back in their face every single time we hear this. Every single time we hear this, why don't we just throw this back at them? Businesses hate people. Businesses are people. What do you think a business is? If you listen to these idiots and these loons in Occupy Wall Street, these morons, they will tell you that corporations are running this and corporations are running that and corporations are evil and corporations are... It's like as if corporations were controlled by reptilian aliens from outer space. Some liberals believe this, actually. But if you take a person apart, you find out they're actually not reptilian aliens, they're actual human beings. A corporation is an assembly of human beings. I'm a corporation. I was a corporation, it was just me. I have an employee now besides me, but I'm a corporation. And everything is, look, Next time you run into a liberal who talks about evil corporations, evil, horrible corporations, you challenge them, because I guarantee you that every single thing that person likes in life is the result of a corporation. Their iPhone is a corporation. The network that carries their cell data is a corporation. Nike's a corporation. The clothes they wear are corporations. The Hero cameras that they use for their anti-corporate protests, they're all corporations. They go to work in cars that are made by corporations. Their buildings are owned by corporations. The beds they sleep on, the nice mattresses and the nice pillows are all manufactured by corporations. All of it is corporations. All of it. And people like Bill Maher, who hate corporations, and Michael Moore, who comes out against corporations, guess what? They're corporations. They're corporations too. They're corporations too. Michael Moore is a corporation. I tell you he is. Matt Damon is a corporation, and so is Bill Maher, and so are all of them. This idea that a corporation is some alien entity, it's like some foreign governor that's been imposed upon the human race by our insect overlords who live in the center of the galaxy, is absolutely nonsense. It's a group of people. And when you say, oh, these rich people that own Exxon, you know who owns Exxon? I own Exxon. You own Exxon. People own Exxon. If you have money in a retirement account, you probably own some Exxon. A company, a corporation, is a group of individuals who get together to accomplish a specific task. And that task is to provide a service in exchange for money, and ideally, they make more money than it costs to provide the service, because if they don't make a profit, then the service goes away. So you may be on your way to drive into Washington to bitch about the oil pipeline, but you are going to put gasoline in your car in order to get to Washington to complain about oil pipeline and carbon fuels and all the rest of the stuff these people complain about. And when you go home and you turn on your lights, that's all going to be run by fuels too. When you complain about a corporation making money, then what you're basically saying is, well, they shouldn't make any money. Well, if they don't make any money, they're not going to do it. And if they don't do it, you're not going to have any electricity, and you're not going to have any gasoline, you're not going to have any cars, you're not going to have anything. You're not going to have an iPhone, you're not going to have anything. You're going to have what the rest of the world had before corporations came along, which is you're going to have a thatched hut that you are going to have to make yourself. You're going to have a fire in the middle of the room where the smoke goes up through a hole, which the rain comes down through. And if you want something more than that, then you better get okay with the idea of a corporation. Because they tried living without corporations in the Soviet Union and nothing worked. There was no food, there was no electricity, there was no nothing. There was electricity, went on and off all the time. If it went out, too bad. Wait in line for a car, 10 years. Wait in line for an apartment, 20 years. This is the alternative to allowing people to get together to provide services in exchange for money. That's the alternative. There is no alternative. Every single thing in every single progressive's life that they bitch about every single day is a corporation, but every single thing that they like about their lives is a corporation. Everything in their life that they like is a corporation. Their tie-dyed shirts are provided to them by corporations. I guarantee you, they're certainly delivered by corporations. They're just such bloody hypocrites. They're such god-awful hypocrites. Awful people. Why don't businesses care about people? Where do you think people get their money from to buy their food? Where do you think people's food comes from? Their food comes from working in exchange for tokens which can buy food. If it weren't for businesses, these people wouldn't have jobs. If they didn't have jobs, they wouldn't have money. If they didn't have money, they wouldn't have food. Corporations provide not only the wealth of the world, but they also supply all of the essentials, the necessities of the world. And every time you take a corporation away and let a government do that, you get a lot less of it. The Soviet Union, with some of the most incredible farmland in the world in terms of the Ukraine and so on, these people couldn't even feed themselves. They couldn't even feed themselves because of their big brain philosophy, their big brain political philosophy. And so a socialist sits there and talks about how evil corporations are and can't get through their little dime-sized brains that if it's 4 o'clock in the morning and there's a sick calf in the barn and the calf doesn't belong to anybody, belongs to everybody equally, then no one is going to go out there and take care of that calf. No one. And so the calf dies. And so there is no calf. And then there's no more milk. And then there's no more cows. And then everybody goes without, but they go without together. See, that's the main thing. I just want to take away every single thing that a business provides for these losers and these crybabies and these envious, mean-spirited little lazy bastards who will not get up and work no matter what. I'd like to take every single thing that had a corporate structure away from their lives, every single thing, and they'd have nothing left. Nothing left. They'd have nothing left, these idiots. Moving on. Susan Speakman says, come on now, seriously, how many guns do you really need? You know how many guns I really need, Susan? As many as I damn well want. That's the answer to that question. As many as I have the money for. That's the answer to that question. The same answer to how many guns do I really need is the same answer to how many houses do I really need, or how many airplanes do I really need, or how many watches do I really need, or how many pairs of socks do I really need, how many pairs of underwear do I really need? Well, I suppose when you get right down to it, Mr. Progressive, I suppose when you get right down to it, I really only need one pair of underwear. Actually, probably don't even really need underwear at all. Probably just need one pair of pants. And I really only need one shirt. And I really only need one pair of socks, which I'll have to wash every 4, 5, 6 days if I'm lucky, every 8, 10, 12, 15 days. That's okay. I only need one pair. I only need one pair of shoes. As far as living, I only need a roof over my head that I can seal against the elements. I don't really need anything more than that. As far as automobile goes, I don't really need an automobile. I just need to get to work. So as long as there's a train, I can get up 2 or 3 hours earlier to catch the bus or whatever else I need to do so that I can get to work. So I don't really need a car. Don't really need anything other than food, air, water, and shelter. And so if this person that asks you a question, how many guns do you really need? You ask them, how many forks do they need? How many pieces of china do they need? How many bars of soap do they need? How many anything do you really need? The answer is one. That's all you need. And when we get to a world where everything is dispersed according to what is the minimum you need, guess where you are. You're either in the miserable, low good-for-nothing second world of communism where everything was taken away from the people who worked hard. Those people were killed. They were called wreckers and kulaks. You know why kulaks were rich peasants? You know why they were rich? Peasants, right? When I say the kulaks were rich, that had to be exterminated in the 30s by our socialist betters and our progressive friends. The reason that our progressive friends killed the kulaks was because they were rich kulaks. They had 2 or 3 oxen. They didn't just have no oxen. They had 2 or 3 or 4. And maybe they had 2 or 3 people working with them or for them to help them gather their grain. So they were rich. So they had to be killed, and all of their food had to be taken away. Do you know why they were rich? They were rich because if you're going to be a farmer in Russia in the 1920s, it does not require a degree from Harvard in order to do that. It doesn't require noble birth because you're living in a thatched hut. It doesn't require a special sense of artistic ability. What it requires to be a rich peasant in Russia is you have to work harder than other people do. And so the kulaks worked harder than other people did, and the people who didn't work at all didn't like that, so they had them killed. So if you get down to the what do you really need, you can either go that way, where the government provides the bare bone minimums of everything, or you can go all the way to the third world, where there is no government and there is no anything. There's no nothing. Look at the third world. Look at Mexico, or look at parts of South America, or look at virtually all of Africa. Watch daily life in Africa. Take a look at, and this applies to the whole third world. It's Thailand as well. It's nothing to do with Africa. It's parts of the Caucasus are this way. Look at the third world next time you see them on TV or on YouTube, and look at them and look at what's going on. Look at the clothes they're wearing. Look at the cars they're driving. Look at the cell phones. Look at the AK-47s, and remind yourself that these people cannot manufacture any of this. They can't make any of it. They can't make a cotton T-shirt. They can't make a gun. They can't make a car. They can't do anything. Nothing. If you start asking people what's the minimum you need, you end up back in a village with a spear and a thatched hut, because that's about all you need, really, when you get right down to it, is a spear, a bucket to carry the water, and a thatched hut to live in. Now, on the other hand, if the question becomes how many guns do you want, or how many airplanes do you want, or how many houses do you want, or how many cars do you want, or how many changes of underwear do you want, or how many watches do you want? Now, if you live in a world where your want is something that is attainable, then you will find that people will work harder than they would if they couldn't get what they want. If you can't get what you want, you have no incentive to work hard. And if you live in a place where you can never get what you want, you either become a raging alcoholic, like every single person in the Soviet Union seems to be, or you simply give up and chew your cot or whatever your narcotic for the day is, as they do in Somalia. That's pretty simple, really. So that's the answer to the question of how many guns do you really need. The answer to the question of how many guns do you really need is, well, the answer is how many guns do you really want? You can have as many guns as you want. and as many TVs as you want, as many things else as you want. And by the way, there's nothing wrong about this, not immoral. This is what being human is about. This is about the essence of being human, is the ability for us to use our intellects and our creativity and our ambition and our hard work to do more than is necessary to feed ourselves for today. We're the only species in the world that's capable of doing more than is necessary to feed ourselves for today. That's what makes us human, that's what makes the whole thing human, and that's what makes the whole thing work. Randy Schnick says, why are you against people getting health care through Obamacare? I'm against people getting health care through Obamacare for a couple of reasons, Randy. First of all, it's not free health care. It's being paid for. So what's happening is my money is being taken out of my wallet at gunpoint by the federal government. They're taking it to Washington. They're building a website, which should have cost $10 to $20 million, and they're paying $900 million to their crony friends for the website. They've set up a standing army. About as many people administer healthcare regulations as the people who actually provide the healthcare. All those people have to be paid, so there's that healthcare money that's been cut again. Then they decide how much of this money is going to go to their union friends and how much is going to go to the Acorn and all the rest of the stuff, and all that money is going to disappear. So these are the actual numbers, for every dollar of healthcare that the government takes from me by force, they produce about 35 to 40 cents worth of healthcare. So my first feeling would be, well, if I'm buying healthcare, why would I send them $1 worth of healthcare and get 40 cents of healthcare back? That's number one. That's number one. Number two, since I'm paying for health care, why would I let one person determine whether I get the health care or not if that person isn't me? If that person isn't me, then why would I let somebody else take my money to give me my health care? Because if I let them take my money to provide me my health care through the government, then they can turn it off. Oh, that doesn't happen. It happens every single day. It happens every single day in the National Health Service in Great Britain and in the healthcare system up in Canada. Every single day, people are told, we are really sorry, but we are out of options. We've run out of the budget for this. The thing right now, the best thing we can do, you're 82 years old. A hip replacement costs X amount of money. We just don't have the money. We just don't because of budget shortfalls. So here's some pain medication. Go down and lie down, and here's some morphine so you don't feel quite so bad. And as you get older, then the options get smaller and smaller. And when the government healthcare system says you're done because you don't get to go to another government. Of all of the discussions I ever had on healthcare in my entire life, the one that meant the most to me by a country mile was when I was in Canada, talking to a man who ran a small oncology lab up there, who said that, first of all, Canadian healthcare is not what they want you to think. There are several different layers of healthcare in Canada, and your outcome is determined by your access, and your access is determined by who you know. If you actually think that the people who run the government in Canada don't get to the front of the line in terms of healthcare, well, guess what? You're wrong. But of all the things this guy said, the thing that moved me actually to tears was, forget the fact that the Canadians have to come down to America to get the health care that they need because they don't want to wait in line for 9 months for pneumonia or whatever the case may be. So they're paying twice. It's coming out of their taxes, then they're paying cash to get it done right down here. So the reason I don't like Obamacare is because they're trying to turn us into something that's a patent failure. And I keep driving around the point, but the point is this. This guy ran a lab, oncology lab. And basically what he said was there was hardly a week that went by where he did not get a letter or an email from a friend or just an acquaintance, maybe somebody he knew 20 years ago in high school, who said, hey, listen, I've got terminal this, or my daughter has terminal that. And the healthcare system has said, I'm sorry, there's nothing left that we can do. We've tried everything. We've tried every procedure that we have, and we've spent the money. I'm not even claiming they're saying they don't have the money. They're just saying, we've just done everything. There's just no more procedures left. We're terribly sorry. Here's some medication. Go home and die peacefully. And this guy gets letters and calls all the time from people saying, could you look at my results? Because the system is finished with me. And he looks at the results. And he says to them virtually every time, he says, there is a guy at the University of Tennessee who is trying a new procedure or a new clinical trials that are showing 14% survival rate for cancer in this stage of development. Now, 14% may not sound good to you, but I'll tell you something. If I had terminal cancer and the government said, we're done, I'd jump on that 14% like there was no tomorrow. No tomorrow. Because what this guy said to me, he said this verbatim. He said, in Canada, when the government decides that you're finished, you're dead. But in America, you're not dead until you're dead. And that's why I don't want the government controlling my health care. I don't want the inefficiency, and I don't want the control. Probably enough people have been kicked out of healthcare because of Obamacare to cover the numbers that signed up that weren't covered before. But if the entire problem were, the highest number I heard was 7% of the population prior to Obamacare was not covered. Other 93% of the people in this country had, without question, the best healthcare system in the world, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. So if somebody said to me, hey, we're going to governmentize the whole thing, we're just going to take over the whole thing, or we'll raise enough taxes for the American taxpayers to pay every single person who's not on healthcare and get them on Blue Cross, I would have taken that second choice in a heartbeat. But no. And when you get right down to it, the real reason healthcare costs so much money is because the government's involved. There's only two parts of the healthcare system where prices are falling, and one of them is LASIK, and the other one is cosmetic surgery. And the only two reasons that LASIK and cosmetic surgery prices are going down while everything else is going up is because LASIK and cosmetic surgery are not covered by insurance. And so people shop around and they get the best rates, and businesses, like the doctors, are in competition with each other to offer the best possible service at the lowest possible price, and guess what happens? So if you want to fix the healthcare system in the country, you basically eliminate the insurance government tripod. You basically say to people, start an individual health fund that you're going to be tax-free. Your employer can kick into that a little bit like he does before. You're not married to the employer. You want to go someplace else, fine. You're not part of this New Deal lunacy where your health care had to be provided because they couldn't raise your salary because FDR put a salary cap on things. That's how we got locked into this job and healthcare thing, is FDR. And basically make healthcare like any other commodity, like detergent or like a bicycle or anything else you want to buy. You can shop anywhere around in the country and you can compare what you get for what it costs. Make your choices. And instead of charging the insurance company to go to the doctor to take a look at a sprained finger or a sore throat, you pay for that in cash, which means that he doesn't have to process all these claims and he can charge you less money. You pay cash for that out of this fund. And then you buy, with that money, you also buy stop-loss insurance. This is the kind of insurance that says if you get cancer, if you get hit by a bus and all of a sudden we're going to kick in $200,000, but that's basically not paying insurance for everything. Your car insurance doesn't cover the refueling your car, and it doesn't cover balancing your tires. And if you get a ding on your door in your car, that's not covered by your insurance. It's covered by your deductible, because if a ding on a car door was covered by insurance, everybody would take their cars in to get dings painted at the cost of thousands of dollars per ding. It's a giant mess because the government's involved, and once the government subsidizes things, then businesses make the smart move, which is to suck up the government subsidies. It's not the right move. It's not the moral move, but from a business point of view, it's a smart move. It's like banks. If a government's going to say, hey, you write a loan to somebody for a mortgage, before the government says anything, the guy says, I'm not writing that person a loan or a mortgage. Their credit's terrible. The government says, no, you are going to write that loan. Then the banker says, well, if we write that loan, we're going to go out of business. Then the government says, well, don't you worry. If anybody defaults on a loan, we'll cover it. Then the bank says, you're going to cover all of the bad loans that we make? Yes. Then the bank says, it's no longer about making good loans. It's about making as many loans as we can because we can't lose. And that's what happens when the government gets involved with business. They change the market equation. They change the risk and reward equation, the balance and loss equation, and weird and stupid and bad things start happening. Pretty simple. Randy Schnick wants to know, what's wrong with you that you are against fast food workers making $15 an hour? I'm not against fast food workers making $15 an hour. I'm against fast food workers being forced to be paid $15 an hour. If a fast food worker is worth $15 an hour, then the market will pay him $15 an hour. Anytime somebody legislates a price that is not set by supply and demand, bad things happen. I'm not against fast food workers making $15 an hour. If the market will bear $15 an hour, great. if all of a sudden we are in a situation where fast food is in such short demand that in order to get a McDonald's burger, it costs you $18 and you can pay somebody $15 an hour at that rate, well, then that's the choice that the consumers will have to make. That's the choice that they're going to have to make. Do I want to pay an $18 burger? I guess I do. Well, if I want an $18 burger, then you can pay a guy $15 to make it. But if you don't want to pay $18 for a burger, then the fast food worker gets paid what it costs to make the burger. And if he doesn't like the fact that that's not a lot of money, then maybe he ought to think about getting another job, because part-time work was never intended to be full-time work. And the reason we know that part-time work was never supposed to be full-time work is because it's named part-time work and not full-time work. That's what I'm talking about. These minimum wage jobs are part-time jobs that teenagers or retired people or people who have a little extra money on the side want to make a little extra money, they can make a little extra money. They're starter jobs. They're jobs that people do if they have some time on their hands. They're never intended to be living wage. I'm not making a living wage flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. I'm sorry about that. I am. I'm not unsympathetic to the fact that you're not making a living wage. I am unsympathetic to the fact that you don't do something to make a living wage. You know, given the age of the internet, it's inexcusable that people don't improve themselves. It's just, I'm not, when I say inexcusable, I'm not saying it's not understandable. I'm not even saying it's bad. I'm just saying there's no excuse for it. You have the ability to get online degrees for free. If you want to become a plumber online, you can become a plumber online. Somebody just pointed out, Raphael Leibovitz says, hey, Mr. Wood, I eat kosher food. An $18 burger is par for the course. There you go. That is a special requirement that people are ready to pay special money for. And in fact, I'm sure there obviously is a market for kosher food, which is more expensive than non-kosher food. It has to be more expensive. It's tougher to make. People are willing to pay it. There you go. So, look, you can tell somebody, these people are saying, by the way, when they say, why, these fast food worker things, we want to make $15 an hour. Why 15? Why $15 an hour? Why not make $200 an hour? If you're going to legislate that these guys should get a wage, why should we settle for $15 an hour? Why not pay them $50 an hour? Wouldn't that be better? And to listen to the liberals talk about it, if you paid them all $50 an hour, they'd have more money to spend on buying things. Well, that's part true. If they did make $50 an hour, they would have more money to spend to buy things. That'd be good for everybody. But the problem is, if a fast food worker makes $50 an hour, then the hamburger is going to cost $60. No one who wants to buy a $60 hamburger, so the fast food worker's out of work. And of course, Randy, that's where it ends up, right? I mean, that's what it's going to do. If they legislate $15 minimum wage, then the same thing that's going to happen with oil shale is going to happen to the fast food market. That burger flipping machine that used to cost more money than a fast food worker did, not anymore. Not anymore. Now that machine is actually a bargain. And once people start selling those machines because the workers are too expensive, then there's going to be a market for the machines. The machines will become more sophisticated and there'll be more of them, which means they'll cost less money. And what these fast food workers are going to do is they're going to basically put themselves out of a job. And then they'll get what they really want, which is just basically sitting around and collecting a check from the rest of the people who are not working minimum wage jobs. I'm sorry. Overload Ed says, room service hamburger. You know what room service hamburger costs in a decent hotel? It's a $20 hamburger. And why do people pay $20 for a hamburger? They pay $20 for a hamburger, speaking from experience here, because sometimes people are so damn tired and so damn hungry because they've been traveling all day that they will pay $20 for a hamburger, although it galls them and makes them grit their teeth, in exchange for the convenience of not having to go out and get something to eat at 2 o'clock in the morning. And one time, it's okay. Listen, I'm just saying, look, I've been a limo driver. I've been a waiter. A waiter is a sub-minimum wage job. I've been a security officer, a security guard. When I started working, minimum wage was $2.15 an hour. My first paycheck for pretty near full-time was $37, something like that. But I don't make that anymore. You know why? Because I decided that I wanted to do something more important and better for me than minimum wage. So I used my minimum wage job to allow me to make college, and the minimum wage job allowed me to get training and education that allowed me to make more than minimum wage. You cannot tell the market what to do. You can't tell gravity what to do, and you can't tell thermodynamics what to do. You can legislate things. You can legislate a $15 minimum wage, and every single bottom of the economic pyramid person will lose their jobs because it won't be worth it. Shale oil and things like that. All these America now has more oil, recoverable oil, usable oil under our feet than Saudi Arabia. Why is that? Well, because did we suddenly discover these vast reserves of crude oil? No. It's because we have in America under our feet oil in the form of shale oil and tar sands up in Canada. And this oil is much harder to get out than crude. And it costs more money than crude. But as the prices of crude rise, all of a sudden this becomes cost effective. When oil was $7 a barrel, shale oil doesn't make any sense. When oil is $120 a barrel, shale oil does make sense. And likewise with minimum wage, once you start setting that wage so high that people can't pay it, then they will start looking at alternatives. Walter, I always get that wrong. Walter Almeida says, this is a long one. Our ideas for elevating the poor depend on a society-wide implementation of our philosophy. However, to a family who is genuinely down and out, our ideas will seem abstract and impractical. These ideas, as wonderful as they are, will not provide a hot meal in their stomachs, a paid electric bill, or a roof over their heads tonight. The liberal strategy will provide the poor with what they need and more, but come with the price of unsustainability, dependency, and indignity. How do we as conservatives help the poor on a practical and tangible level at this very moment while avoiding the pitfalls of the liberal policies? Oh, and how do we do it in a way that lets them know that conservatism is helping them, not liberalism? I can't do anything about the last part because the one thing you can say about, I'm never calling these people liberals again, by the way, leftists or progressives. The one thing about leftists and progressives that you can be absolutely certain of is that they will take credit for everything after they've screwed it up. Barney Frank was the primary person responsible for the housing bubble, and the legislation responsible for closing the gaps in that legislation and dealing with the outrages of that legislation was called the Frank Bill, because Barney Frank, who caused the problem, then became a champion of being the person whose name was on the end of the problem. I was going to save this for last, but it kind of goes for it later. Here's a little card that somebody sent in, and it said, they called me a socialist too when I saved the country from the Great Depression. Well, the problem with this card, which is another one of these pieces of liberal wisdom here, I did it again, progressive wisdom, leftist wisdom, is that, first of all, you are a socialist, Franklin, and secondly, you didn't save the country from the Great Depression. You caused the Great Depression. The reason it was called the Great Depression was because your idiotic policies made it last for 9 years instead of 2 years, as it had with Calvin Coolidge a few years before, where he was in worse economic trouble, cut the federal tax spending by half. Gone. We went from being in this mini depression to a period called the Roaring Twenties. Unemployment fell from I don't even remember the numbers of what Coolidge did. But no, FDR got in there and did exactly the opposite, and he took what might have been a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year depression, turned it into 11-year depression, the Great Depression, when everybody was out of work. Barack Obama's done the same thing, but Barack Obama presumably would have had the experience of seeing FDR, but no, obviously not. They're just too stupid to make that connection. So back to your question, how do we help poor people without them taking credit? If we do help poor people, they will take the credit. That's just the way they are. They're shameless, honorless individuals. But the question is very serious question. It's a very good question, actually. One of the problems we do have as conservatives is twofold, and I think most of it is driven by the fact that most conservatives are sensible people. And since they're sensible people, most conservatives that I've met don't get into the kind of trouble that people find themselves into. Most of the conservatives I met come from happy homes with good fathers and good mothers, and they've understood the value of savings and hard work and education. They've had great support systems. They're surrounded by people who delay gratification. They're surrounded by people who discipline themselves, both in terms of their time, their work, their personal habits, their appetites, all these things. So they learned how to become reasonable, effective citizens, and they learned how to become people who don't get into those kind of troubles. But some people do get into those kind of troubles. A lot of people get into those kind of troubles, and I'm one of those people that got into those kind of troubles. I was living in a friend's garage for 6 months. I've had my power turned off for years, just cut off because I didn't have the money for it. And I've had people knocking on my door asking for rent too. So I know what that's like. I know how I got into that trouble, and I kind of know how I got out of the trouble. But the one thing that we do have to be careful of, and that we don't do nearly enough of, is this idea that, well, the poor, just screw them. To hell with them. It's their fault. They got in that trouble. It's their problem. Get out of it. That's not going to help on a lot of levels. First of all, certainly not going to help us win elections, which would be nice. Secondly, it's not kind. And you're going to have to look a long way before you find somebody who's more opposed to forced charity than I am. I just have to respond to something. Laughing Hyena said, at least FDR tried to win World War II. FDR deserves credit for a lot of things. I think he was a pretty good war president, but I will tell you what FDR deserves a great deal of credit for. And I just have to get this in here because being fair is important. It's a difference between us and them. What FDR did do, at great personal risk to himself, was FDR kept America in the war before America got into the war, with Lend-Lease primarily. No one talks about Lend-Lease. Everybody talks about the Marshall Plan. And everybody talks about the Normandy invasion, all that other stuff. Pretty much FDR by himself determined that this war that was brewing in Germany, it started in Germany, was going to be the end of civilization. And even though he didn't have the power to declare war at that time, he did make sure that both Britain and the Russians got the kind of military aid that they needed to stay in that war. I do not believe Britain would have survived the war. I know Britain wouldn't have survived the war without Lend-Lease. And I don't think the Russians would have either. That was an important thing to do. And I thought as a war president, he really wasn't too bad. But domestically, he was the worst thing since Wilson. And you put Wilson, Roosevelt, Johnson, and Obama in the same room, and you've got every problem we ever had. So back to this problem of how do you actually help people? Well, there's a lot of ways that you can help people, and I think I've never seen it better in practice. It was on a relatively small scale than I did when I visited the Mormons. I went up to Salt Lake City in 2009 or 10, I wanted to say, and I was given a tour of, I think it was called Welfare Square, where what the Mormon Church was doing was they were canning and preserving huge quantities of food and distributing them all around the world with no fanfare at all. They get a lot of bad press. I don't hear that they ever get any good press. And they showed me a bunch of things that I thought was very interesting there. For example, in the facility where all of this food was canned or jarred, they said there was a machine that they could have bought. Honestly, now this is what they told me, that would mechanically screw the jar on, but they decided not to get it because it was important that they give somebody the job to screw these jars on. And so what they would do with people who were destitute in the Mormon Church was they would take these people in, and they did two things that I think are critical. The first thing they did was, instead of giving them money, they gave them work. They gave them work, and they gave them work, and that work allowed them to buy food, and that was important. But the thing that they did that I think was critical was they basically adopted them. Because really, folks, nobody really wants to talk about this. But when you get down to the heart of what poverty is, poverty in America anyway, because we don't have poverty in the same way that actual poverty is. Poverty in America is the result of a ongoing series of terribly bad decisions. Some of these bad decisions are subsidized by the federal government. If you tell a single mother that she gets a certain amount of money a month, but if she has a kid, she gets more money. And if she has 2 kids, she gets more money. And if she has 8 kids, she gets even more money. Then you are subsidizing fatherless children. You're paying for it. Don't be surprised if you get it. That has to go away right away. What the Mormons did was they took an individual family or an individual and gave them a support structure of people who didn't make bad decisions. They showed them how to make food out of bags of rice. Most people didn't know how to do that. They didn't know how to make good food, inexpensively. They didn't know how to do much of anything. One of the greatest things I ever read about poverty was about a guy in San Francisco. He was a big liberal, and he I assume he was. I assume he was when he went in anyway. And he decided he wanted to live among the poor of San Francisco for a couple years, just kind of an upscale, well-educated white guy. And he just decided he's going to go live with the poor. Lived in ghettos and lived in these god-awful places. He lived in places where somebody would get a sofa. I'll never forget this story. They would get a new sofa or a new used sofa, and they'd take it up 3 flights of stairs or whatever, and they'd put the new sofa in the living room. They'd take the old sofa out of the living room, and they'd leave it in the hall. They'd just leave it there. For how long? Forever. People had to walk over the sofa because they didn't, on some level, it's really true. They didn't know any better. They just didn't know any better. You got some serious issues here. This is an episode we spend 5 hours on just this. One of the great unspoken things too is how deeply poverty is connected to IQ and intelligence. It's a remarkable correlation. Crime, poverty, and intelligence directly correlated. Criminals are criminals because they literally don't have the brain power to be able to foresee what the consequences of their actions are. They live in the moment. Maybe they live 1 step ahead of their move. They're not thinking 5 steps ahead or 10 steps ahead. Getting out of poverty requires planning. It requires short-term planning in terms of saving enough money so that you can pay your bills at the end of the month, because you got to know what those bills are. And it requires long-term planning in terms of understanding that you have to save even more so that your kids can get an education so they won't be poor. But one of the most important things I ever heard about poverty was that in America anyway, I forget what the 3 things were exactly, but I think mostly it was if you wait until if you finish high school, if you don't have children until you're married, and there was one other thing, simple thing like that, probably just those 2. Finish high school and don't have kids until you're married. There is no poverty in America for those people. Virtually unheard of. So the short answer is we can't go in there like we're going to burn their houses down. And sometimes we do. And certainly that's what they hear, and that's what the media tells them we want to do, and that's what the Democrats tell them we want to do. But we don't want to burn their houses down. What we want to do is we want to build another set of houses. We want to build a parallel structure of houses that they can live in. And when I say a house, I mean a way of life. So you don't go into America and say, well, we're just going to cut welfare. The checks are going to get cut. Too bad for you. Not only people aren't going to vote for you that way, they're going to riot. And I don't blame them. I'd riot too if my food was being taken away. What we have to do is we have to say we are going to start a long and slow transition, because it took a long time to get here, to move you to this other world. But the one thing we have to do, and this is what Mitt Romney could not do to save his life, is we have to tell people this is not a sacrifice. We're not moving you into worse housing. We're moving you into better housing. When Romney was saying, 49% of the people or 47% are unreachable because they get government benefits, that's when he lost the election. Not because of the fallout of that, because he's right, by the way. He lost the election because he gave up on those people. You can't give up half the country and win an election. Mitt Romney should have had a plan for every single American to vote for Mitt Romney. Every single American to vote for Mitt Romney. And the way you do that is to say, yes, right now the Democrats are giving you free health care and free housing and free phones and free everything. And if I was Romney, I would have said, but the housing is crap. You know it's crap because you live in it. The transportation and the buses and stuff, that's crap too. You know it's crap because you ride them every day. The food is crap because you buy the stuff on the EBT card. You know it's crap. And the phone that you get is a crappy old phone with 60 minutes on it or something. It's a piece of crap second-generation phone, and that's crap too. And I'm going to show you how you can have stuff that's not crap. What Mitt Romney should have done is not say we're coming to take away your phone. We're coming to show you how to get a better phone. We're going to show you how you can have an iPhone 6, because when we're done, you're going to be able to go out and buy what you want to. You're going to live in an apartment you want. You're going to buy a car within reason that is a nice car that you want to drive around, whatever you want. We're going to show you how to do that, because we're not going to treat you like a piece of dead wood that floats downstream that we call upon for 1 hour every 2 years. We're going to treat you like human beings who are masters of your own destiny. We're going to treat you like men who provide for your families. and we're going to give you a chance to make a better life for yourself, a better life than you ever imagined. And it's not just the financial gains. That's the smallest part of it. We're going to teach you how to take control of your life. We're going to put an outboard motor on this raft that you're on. And you're not going to just float down the river of your life like you have been for the last 20 or 30 years. You're not going to just float down the river of life wherever the river is taking you. We're going to show you how to move around in that river. We're going to show you how to go to the left or to the right, and we're going to show you, if you work hard enough, how you can go back upstream and go wherever you damn well want to. You're going to be masters of your own fate and destiny. And if you want something and you're ready to work for it, you can have it. That's what we're going to teach them. And you're going to have to do it one by one. And then we're going to have to hand them off to people who are going to have to mentor them and tutor them and treat them just like any other people with serious illness. We're going to have to teach them how to get better. That's it. We can't pander to them, and we can't pretend that this isn't going to be difficult. It is difficult. It's difficult. It's very hard to kick heroin. But the alternative to not kicking heroin is to die. And before you die, you spend your life in a coma. It may seem pleasant while the high is starting, but it's never as pleasant as actual achievement is. And most of the time it's hell. And then you die. And we want to save you from that. We're not going to keep supplying you with the injections. That's their job over there for the Democrats and the rest of the progressives. They keep handing you needles because they like useless people who have no control over their lives, who are dependent on them. They just need your vote, by the way. By the way, if you didn't have a vote, poor people, they would leave you to the wolves. It's only because we have a system based on voting that they're ready to do this. They're ready to give you the bare bone minimum that they have to, because if they didn't have your vote every 2 years, they wouldn't have the power for them to fly around in corporate jets. Barack Obama flies around in a 747. That's why he wants to be president. And Hillary Clinton flies around in a 747. And so did Bill, and so did the rest of them. And so did George Bush, for that matter. Do any of these people, do you think that any of them could have afforded a 747 on their own? No. They get their benefits by pandering to you, and the way they pander to you is to make you helpless and useless and worthless. And that's what they've been doing, and we're going to stop it. Patty Ann says, we're all illegals because Native Americans were here first. True. True enough. True. So, what do we do about that? Let's take a look at the situation in Mexico. That's what illegals refer to, right? We're all illegals. How dare you say that Mexicans are illegals when you stole the land for Mexico? That's the La Raza argument. That's the argument for unlimited immigration. How dare you Caucasians and your Europeans put up a border here when we Mexicans were here before you? Well, first of all, if that border line were drawn 30 miles north, people wouldn't be crossing from Tijuana to get into San Diego, because San Diego would be indistinguishable from Tijuana. The further north that border went, the more the world would look like Mexico, and people want to leave Mexico to come here. What they should have been praying for was that we'd conquered the entire state of Mexico all the way down to the Isthmus of Panama, and then Mexicans wouldn't want to be coming up here. We'd all be rich together. But no, that's not what happened. But let's go to this business about the only people that belong here are the Native Americans. Let's start with Mexico. We should give the land back. I've had this argument before. I love it. We should give Texas, for example. We should give Texas back to its rightful owners, the people who had it before us, before we Americans had it. Which means we should give Texas back to the Confederacy, because the Confederacy owned Texas before the United States did. No. Nice try, Mr. Conservative White Guy. You have to give it back to the people that owned it before that. Oh, well, in that case, we have to give it back to the Republic of Texas, because they owned the ground in Lubbock, let's say, before the Confederacy did. Keep going. Oh, I see what you're saying. We should give it back to Mexico. Yes. Why do we stop there? Is it because you're Mexicans and you want the land? Is that why we should stop there? Shouldn't we give the land back to the Spanish, because the Mexicans basically rebelled against Spain? Shouldn't we give the land back to the Spanish, who the Mexicans stole it from? But the problem with giving it back to the Spanish is the Spanish would have to give it back to the French, because the Spanish stole it from the French. You know who the French stole it from? They stole it from the Spanish. Now, the Spanish stole it from a number of Native American tribes, some of which have familiar names. I don't know if the Mayans were quite that far north, or the Toltecs, or anything like that. But ultimately, you can go all the way back to, it's one of these men, it's like Piltdown Man, or something. It's not Piltdown Man, but it's one of these prehistoric peoples. So the only people that have a right to that land are either, it's not Piltdown Man, but it's somebody 100,000 years ago, 70,000 years ago. It either belongs to them or it belongs to us, because they had it first and we have it now. There's nobody in between that had a unique position. Mexico may have had it stolen from them, but Mexico stole it from somebody else. So there's that argument. If you can find some of Clovis, man, that's who it was. You find me some Clovis people, we'll have a discussion about whether the land goes back to them, but it doesn't go back to them because there are no more Clovis people, because they were killed by people who became Mexicans. That's number one. And number two, when you talk about this thing with the Native Americans, this is the thing where liberals talk about, right? White man came here and took this pristine land away from the Native American, who nobly sits on top of his horse with the rifle in his hand and surveys the buffalo herds, taking only what he needs, just the bare bones minimum, living a life of 100% carbon neutrality and total recycling and all that other stuff. So when you ask liberals about, I keep saying that, when you ask progressives about the Native Americans, ask them to describe a Native American to you. Describe a Native American to me who we stole the land from. And they'll tell you the same thing all the time. They'll say, well, he had a horse and lived in teepees and all that other stuff. And their names were Comanche and Sioux and Lakota and Iroquois and Blackfoot and so on. But the problem with that is that horses were brought to America by Europeans. There were no horses here before white people got here. There weren't any. So this idea of an Indian on a horse chasing herds of horses is not what was here before we were here, because we brought the horse to America. Europeans did. There was no horse culture here. What was here were a series of tribes that constantly warred upon each other. And you find that the more primitive a society is, the more they're at war with each other. It's all the time. So, yes, it's true the Cherokees were at war with the whoever they were bordering with, and so on and so forth, back and forth. But the Comanches, by the way, the Spanish took it from the Comanches. The Comanches took it from everybody. These people were at war with everybody. The Comanches would raid a rival tribe, and they would murder the men, and they would either rape or steal the women, steal the children as well, steal all the stuff, burn the villages down, all this stuff. It didn't start with us, you know. So the question is, when you say it belongs to Native Americans, it doesn't belong to Cherokees and it doesn't belong to Iroquois, because they weren't here. They conquered the people that were here before them, and the people that were here before them, and the people that were here before them, because the very first Americans looked like Mongolians, because that's where they came from. They came across the Bering Land Bridge. So it doesn't really belong to anybody in that sense. On some level, you can say it belongs to whoever's got it and whoever has it, which is why I'm in favor of a strong defense, frankly. People say, would you like it if somebody came and stole this land from you? I wouldn't like it at all, which is why I'm kind of big on aircraft carriers and bombers and rifles, because no. Now, am I saying that might makes right? No, I'm not saying that. I'm not one of those people that thinks that it's okay because we have the power. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that to the degree that taking somebody else's land is a sin, that sin is pinned exclusively on modern white Americans. But the fact is, there is not a yard of earth that has not been taken over by somebody else through bloodshed, going back to Olduvai Gorge in Africa. There's not a patch of earth that people live on today that wasn't taken by somebody else. And when I hear Europeans say, what did you do to the Indians, you heartless bastards? My response would be, what did you do to the Celts? What did you do to the Franks? What did you do to the Angles? What did you do to the Saxons? What did you do to all the prehistoric people that didn't even have any names? I swear to God, if there's not a blood-soaked more portion of this earth than France, I do not know where it is. The the blood and the conquest and the backwards and forwards and the taking and the retaking and so on 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 in Europe is mind-boggling. Same thing goes for Asia. There was the Mongols, and the Mongols were overrun by the Qin dynasty and the Qin dynasty and the Ming dynasty and this dynasty, and the frickin' Vikings come down. It's just the way it is. It's the way it is. What we didn't have until the modern day was we didn't have this self-loathing that is generated by this much prosperity and this much people who determine that they cannot defeat us militarily, so they have to defeat us morally. Am I guilty about living in America that used to belong to somebody else? I'm not. You know why? I didn't kill anybody for this land. And my dad didn't either. And even if my dad did, that wouldn't be me. That would be somebody else. So I'm guilty about the things that I do. I'm guilty about the actions that I take. If I thought that the war in Iraq was a war to gain Iraqi territory, I'd feel guilty about that. But it's not. And it wasn't a war for oil either, because we stood on the oil fields in Gulf War when Saddam blew them all up, and the U.S. Army sat on the richest oil fields in the world, and we put out the fires, and then we came home. So there you go. There you go. Aloe Constant says, how can you think you'll ever have an electoral prayer unless you embrace undocumented migrants and bring them out of the shadows? I kind of agree with you, Aloe. I think we should embrace undocumented migrants and bring them out of the shadows. I categorically think we should. I think we seal the border, and then we basically say to people who've been here illegally, congratulations, you're guest workers. You get a driver's license or whatever. We know who you are. You get some benefits. We treat you in hospitals. You get some benefits, but you don't get the vote. If you want to ask me what benefits guest workers should get and not get, I'd be up for discussion, but I stop at the vote. Because when they can vote themselves the rest of the benefits. Guest worker programs work throughout the world. A guest worker program with Mexico would be spectacular. Because if we weren't paying social benefits to these people, then cheap labor from Mexico would be nothing but a gain for us. We'd know who they are. We'd know what their benefits are. They'd know what their legal rights are. They wouldn't be living in shadows or fear or anything like that. It'd be marvelous. And as long as it's a guest worker program and people aren't coming here for benefits, then it's like we'll take as many people as the market will bear. When the economy's humming, we'll take more of them. When the economy slows down, we'll take fewer of them. And when I say take them, they just won't have a job. So if they come here and they don't have a job, they wouldn't stay. So I think guest worker program is a grand idea. I think this business that we have now is terrible. But yes, Gloomhound, Vikings in China. The Vikings were everywhere. I don't care if there's no evidence of the Vikings being in China. I say the Vikings were everywhere. At least one or two Vikings probably got to China. Sometimes the comment sections catch my eye. By the way, the greatest thing about the Vikings were the berserkers. And I'm telling you, Gloomhound, there may not be an archaeological record for it, but I'm telling you, a culture that produced the berserkers means there were Vikings in China trying to conquer China. Probably 2 or 3 guys in a canoe, but I bet that's enough. Berserkers were, this is my limited information coming to bay here. Berserkers were Viking warriors who went mad, they went berserk. That's where the term came from. They were advertised as being mad. They were shock troops. And the thing I like most about the berserkers were apparently when the Viking longboats were approaching the shore of Ireland or France or Britain or wherever the hell they were going to rape and murder and pillage and burn and steal, as they were approaching the shore, the berserkers would get so close to this enemy territory that they'd go berserk. And they'd jump off the boat and they'd swim to shore ahead of everybody else and they'd start hacking at rocks with their swords. There's stories about berserkers who would start biting trees. How do you not love guys like that? I mean, those guys, the Vikings were awful. And if I'd been in Ireland with an AR-15, we would have stopped the Viking incursions right there. But nevertheless, you got to admire a culture that has berserkers. So I'm telling you, if there were Vikings in China trying to take over China, there's probably 3 or 4 of them. They damn near pulled it off too, I bet. Okay, let's see, moving on. So I do I'm not going to give you an argument about keeping guest workers in shadows. We need a solution. And the solution should be that. And I think they should have a pathway to citizenship, the Mexicans who are here. I just don't think they get to cut in line ahead of anyone else. I think they come forward, they get their guest worker program, they get limited benefits. When I say limited benefits, I mean things like legal protection, the driver's license, that kind of thing. If they get raped or murdered, they can call the cops, that kind of stuff. But they don't get all these social welfare benefits, and they don't get the vote. And if you've been here 20 years, 30 years, congratulations. You're in line. We'll get to you sooner or later. So something. Anyway, Midi Juju Magumbo. If Midi Juju Magumbo is in fact your real name, then my real name is Bat Guano. Seriously, if Midi Juju Magumbo is your real name, then you have the most awesome real name in the world, Gigi. Midi Juju Magumbo. Midi Juju Magumbo says, this is too easy. I heard this one at a dinner party the other night. Quote, how much pain do the American people need to suffer at the gas pumps before they give in and buy more fuel-efficient vehicles? Once again, the power of the market to solve all of these so-called difficult, deep philosophical questions is, in fact, pretty simple. People will buy fuel-efficient vehicles when the price of gasoline makes them cost-effective. Any other questions? And anytime we try to add subsidies into the mix, we're just screwing things up. If fuel prices continue to rise, there will come a point where the high cost of hybrid cars or electric cars will become competitive and people will start buying them. And then something miraculous happens, because once enough people start to buy these kind of cars, then critical mass occurs. The market once again steps up. Instead of legislating highly fuel-efficient cars or hybrid cars, Prius for example, when enough people decide they want those cars because the prices of fuel are so high, then people start producing those cars. But once they start producing those cars, somebody else starts producing those cars as well. And then they start getting into competition to lower the price, and the technology gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, just like everything else. And the wonders of the market take place, and pretty soon fuel-efficient cars are less expensive than they used to be, and less expensive than a conventional car running on expensive fuel. But the answer is, how much pain do the American people need to suffer at the gas pumps? Well, the answer is an individual answer, right? I mean, I have a car that gets 17 miles to the gallon. I used to have a car that got 29 miles to the gallon. And I got the car that gets 17 miles to the gallon because I can afford to pay it. It has higher performance than the car that got 29 miles per gallon. And I can afford the performance, and I can afford the gas. It's like everything else in the world. It should be a free choice made by an individual. So I can afford now a more expensive car, and I can afford more money for gasoline because I've been working very, very hard, and I've been improving my skill set. I'm becoming more rare. I'm becoming more useful. And the more useful and rare I become, the more money I make. It's true for a janitor as much as for a fake celebrity internet pundit. It's true. I've been working my entire life, and now I'm starting to reap some of the rewards of that hard work and all of those pieces that I had to put in place to sit here and talk to you people for actual money, which is what I'm doing. Although I'd do it even if you weren't paying me because I like you so much. I just wouldn't do it as often. Then there's your answer. So when you say how much pain do the American people need to suffer at the gas pumps, that's kind of the kind of question that a progressive would ask. It's a question about the masses, isn't it, Mitty? How much will the masses put up with? Well, there's no two people in the country that have quite exactly the same budget for fuel. I'm sure many of them have the same number for fuel, but really when you get right down to it, we're all individuals. We can afford to pay what we can afford to pay. Some of us can afford to pay more. Some of us can afford to have extremely fuel-inefficient vehicles. Some of us go to a great deal of expense and effort to build things like monster trucks, or tractor pulls or something, which are measured in numbers of gallons to the mile. And if that's what they want to do with their money, then that is their business, baby. And if you want to light a jet engine and put a jet engine on a semi-truck, I forget the guy, I've almost got his name now. Oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. The guy does it at air shows. Doggone it, it'll show up in 10 seconds here in the comments section. But if a guy wants to set up a semi-truck with a gigantic, gas turbine jet engine on the back that generates 30,000 pounds of thrust or something, and then go blowing down the flight line at an air show, and put out a tongue of flame 80 feet long, then not only is that okay with me, that's like I'll pay money to see that, and so a lot of other people. So that's where he gets his money to pay for that fuel, by people paying to see how awesome it is to see a car with or a truck with 30,000 horsepower. You get the idea, right? This is what freedom allows you to do. Freedom allows everybody to make their own decisions and have as much fun as they want to have, and as much fun as they can afford to have. And the more you make, the more fun you can generally afford to have. But the problem is, the more you make, generally speaking, the more you have to work. And so the more you work, the more you make, the more you make, the more fun you have. The less you make, the less you work, the less you make, the less fun you have. And when I say less you work, I'm not trying to say that poor people who have jobs in janitorial services and stuff, I'm not saying they don't work hard. They work very, 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 very hard. I don't have any disrespect for poor people, needless to say. As a matter of fact, I would, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I mean this from the depths of my soul, my respect, admiration, and affection for the guy that comes in here and empties the garbage cans every night is infinitely higher than it is for these highly educated layabout D-bag, Shockwave, thank you, that sit around and collect benefits or talk about how wealth needs to be redistributed. My respect and admiration for the janitor in this building exceeds by orders of magnitude higher respect and admiration for this gentleman than for these douchebag professors at Berkeley who talk about how evil money is and how rich people hate the poor. I don't hate the poor. I hate the idiots. I hate the complainers. I hate the hypocrites. I hate these progressive D-bags who do nothing but bitch about how awful things are and are all about stealing money from working people under the cover of helping the poor when in point of fact, poor working people are the people I have the highest admiration for in the country. They just need to work smarter. And the guy who comes in here and cleans these empties these garbage bags is a fine fellow, and he's doing an honorable thing, and he's feeding his family, I assume. At the very least, he's taking care of himself, and he works like an animal, as I do. We just do different things. And what he needs to do is he needs to take some of his excess time, of which I'm sure he does not have much, but I didn't have much either, and I don't have much now, and learn how to make himself more rare. Pick up a language or pick up some other skill, or get together with two other guys and start a janitorial service on your own and offer better service at lower prices. And then next thing you know, off you go. And if he doesn't want to do that, that's fine too. That's fine too. But anybody can. Anybody can. Joshua Tiemans. Apparently there's a guy named Tiemans who watches the show. How do you know, and that's in caps, how do you know there isn't a perfect system right around the corner waiting for us to implement that would solve our problems? Even if there isn't, how can you be against searching for a way to make the world a better place? Well, that, of course, is a sarcastic question, and I'll answer it in a non-sarcastic way. I don't know that there's not a better system around the corner, but I do know that there isn't a perfect system around the corner, because perfection doesn't exist. And the search for perfection not only eliminates the good or the very good, but the search for perfection kills millions of people. So if you're saying, how do I know there's not a perfect system? I know there's not a perfect system because people aren't perfect. Nobody's perfect. Human beings are not perfect. There is no perfect solution to anything that humans are involved with. Full stop, period. But if the question is, how do you know there's not a better system than capitalism? I don't know there's not a better system than capitalism. Capitalism has many problems. As Winston Churchill said famously, democracy is the worst system of government ever invented, except for all the others. And that's really the way I feel about it. It's not perfect. It's very good. And when left alone, it's very, very good. But it's not perfect. And if somebody were to come along with a different system, I'd say, let's try it. However, if your answer to that is to say, well, there's this thing called socialism, I'll say, socialism is not new, and socialism is not around the corner, and socialism is not a new system. We've tried this many times. There's 200 million dead bodies in shallow graves as a result of this new idea. And at the very, very best, it turns people into dependent zombies living in a nursing home. So you don't get to try that angle with me on socialism, because socialism has been tried and 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 tried, and it fails. And by the way, if you look up progressives, you'll find that pictures of progressives are kind of amusing because they're all old. The progressive movement peaked 100 years ago. Progressivism is at least a century old. It is a catastrophic failure. Progressivism in the West led to socialism in the East, which led to 100 million people dead, but who's counting? So, is there a better system than capitalism? Not in the world today, there isn't. But if you're asking me, Joshua Tiemens, how do I know there's not a better system? I don't, and I would never claim that I do. There may be a better system out there. For example, we now can imagine a replicator, a Star Trek replicator. It was magic when I saw the show in 1966, but with 3D printing, it's not magic anymore. We can also imagine things like thorium reactors, which are extremely safe, very powerful. They have a high yield. They're very, very safe. They're very efficient. Now, I can imagine a world where energy is very inexpensive, virtually free, and I can also imagine a world where, not too far from now, market forces drive 3D printing to a place where, coupled with unlimited resources of energy, virtually everything of value is more or less free. More or less. Now, in a world where you can print food or print Cadillacs just for the cost of the energy, and I'm including the energy to go get it and bring it back, by robots, let's say, then you may in fact have a Star Trek future where there is in fact no money. But that world is not here yet. And until that world gets here, we need to have a look at it. It's not here. So the Santa Claus machine, the machine that reproduces itself and then can produce anything, would in fact change economics the way that we understand economics. But right now, that's not here. Does that mean I want to squash it to protect capitalism? Not at all. I've said this before. It's a relatively new thought for me. If healthcare were free, I'd be a progressive about healthcare. If healthcare were genuinely, actually free, then who wouldn't be in favor of free healthcare for everybody? Nobody. If you could just simply pop out Mercedes-Benzes so that everybody could have one and they didn't cost anything, then let everybody drive a Mercedes-Benz. Why not? Why not? Of course you would. Of course you would. But you can't. And now you start getting into the issue about how nice it would be if you could fly. It would be lovely if you could fly. It'd be lovely if you could meditate. It'd be grand. But we can waste a lot of time talking about things like that because we've never seen people do it because it can't be done. If things change to the degree, as Winston Smith, Room 101, the greatest screen name of all time, says, tea, Earl Grey hot. And you say that in an affected rather fey British accent, and a slot opens, and out comes your puny weakling drink for weaklings who manage to find themselves in commands of large vessels as a result of better men making the place safe enough for you to do nothing but sit around and drink Earl Grey tea hot with your pinky extended. Well, then in that case, fantastic. Have all the Earl Grey tea you want. But remember that's not here yet. So, moving on. Michelle Tongai. Hello, Michelle. Back again. Why do you conservatards, thank you very much, continually accuse Obama of being responsible for the existence of ISIS? The reason, Michelle, is because Obama is responsible for the existence of ISIS. Just because he was mentored by the new left visionist capable of having the insight to ally with Islamic jihadist ideology is not probable cause to blame him for imaginary atrocities. Covered this a lot, and I'll make it quick. Barack Obama inherited an Iraq. He fought as a senator, and his entire political career and all of his progressives in arms, there's fellow travelers, are anti-war people. He fought the Iraq War, and he fought the Iraq War when the Iraq War was going rather badly. But the Iraq that he inherited in 2009 had been won by George Bush and the men who died over there, men and women, and the surge. By the time he took office, the number of combat casualties in Iraq were virtually zero. When you remove American power from the world, bad things happen because American power is the lawnmower and the grass is growing all the time. I've said to people, if you don't want to mow the grass every day, you shouldn't complain about weeds in the lawn because the default state of mankind is not a well-manicured lawn and garden. The default state of the world is weeds. If you want to live in the weeds, you don't have to do anything. If you want to live with a nice manicured lawn and a nice garden, you have to work on that every day. And so, by abandoning Iraq to itself, he gave the few survivors of al-Qaeda that had been killed in the deserts of Iraq by George Bush and the U.S. military, he gave them not only room to grow, not only time to grow, he gave them the moral permission to grow. And he also gave them not just the idea that we were going to leave, but the promise that we were going to leave and when. So if I'm getting my brains beat in by the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marine Corps and the Air Force and the Navy and all these other guys, and they're just knocking my head in, and every day I wake up and more of my comrades and friends are dead because of these deadly Wu-Tang Clan sons of bitches come over from Virginia and wherever else they come from and kicking our butt. If I'm about to get my entire philosophy bashed in, I'm going to surrender sooner or later. But then if all of a sudden the guy who's put in charge of these guys that are kicking my ass here says, yeah, we're going to keep kicking your ass for another 6 months, then we're going to stop, and then 2 years after that, we're going to leave, and we're never coming back. Then I don't have to think about surrendering anymore, which was the only sensible thing to do, or putting all this stuff down and going back to work and getting on with my life. Then I realized all I have to do is hang on. All I have to do is just hang on until they go, because they're promising that they're going to go. And then when they go, I'll do a little bit of testing. I'll check and test and kick the tires, and I'll stick my head out, and maybe I'll behead one person or two people or whatever, and I'll see what they do. If they come swinging in there and knocking me down, then I'm going to stop beheading people. But if they don't, then I'll start beheading 10 people, and I'll start taking over towns, and maybe I'll machine gun down a group of kids or something. And then I'll see what they do. And if they don't do anything, then I'll take more towns, and I'll kill more people, and I'll get everything I want, and I'll get all ginned up. Next thing you know, I've got a third of the country. That's what happens when you promise your enemies you're going to go away. It's what happens when you stop mowing the lawn. And people are surprised that the weeds are growing. We paid a high price for winning the war in Iraq. We paid a high price for winning the war in Vietnam, too, which we did. We won the war in Vietnam. It's not up for discussion. It's not my opinion. When the Vietnamese War started, it started because the North Vietnamese invaded the South. And after 11 years and 56,000 Americans killed, I'm not saying the Vietnam War was fought well, and I'm not saying anything like that. What I'm trying to say is when the war was over, the boundaries of South Vietnam were the same as it were at the beginning of the war. We defended South Vietnamese from the communists and the socialists in the North, and we won the Vietnamese War because we started bombing them. We won the Iraq War, too. We just are losing the peace because once the Republicans win the war, the Democrats take over and lose the peace, because they have to lose the peace, because if we win wars, then America is powerful, and a powerful America is not in their interest. That's their definition of these progressives. Pretty simple, really. So yes, he gets blamed for it because he's responsible for it. I know he claims he's not responsible for anything, but he is. He is responsible for this. He's been president for 5 years. 5 years. Iraq is the graveyard of al-Qaeda, and the few survivors of al-Qaeda formed ISIS. And they ain't done yet. And when they know we're serious, well, they won't know we're serious until somebody gets serious with them, and there's going to be a lot of blood between now and then. Allo Conson has a follow-up question to that. He said, what kind of violent jerk thinks that war solves anything? This kind of violent jerk thinks that war solves anything. This kind thinks that war solves anything. You're looking at a guy, and the reason I think that war solves, I'm not saying war solves everything, the reason I'm saying war does solve some things pretty effectively is not because I like war, because I don't actually like war, you see. I like warriors, I like military hardware. There are elements of the sort of primal quality of life at war that bring out the best and the worst of people. But with all of that said, war is unmitigated horror for everybody. And the people who are the victors come back as damaged in many cases, the people who don't come back as all. War is nothing but awful. It's nothing but awful all the way around. That's why I'm so strongly in favor of our war fighters. I am so strongly in favor of our military because I understand how god-awful war is, and I don't want war. I'm in favor of the military because I like peace. Very much. And the only way to maintain peace is to become so strong that nobody F's with you. And this is the one thing that the cowards on the left will not face. When I say cowards, I don't mean just moral cowards, although they are moral cowards. I mean the personal cowards on the left. These are people who have been bullied their entire lives. And I was bullied when I was a kid, and I didn't have the guts to do anything about it. But I realize now that if I had, and you know what, I have to give myself a little bit of a break here. I just had something flash into my head. I remember being bullied around and pushed around in 7th grade at Shenandoah High School, and you know what? It's actually not true. I did in fact have the guts to do something about it. One morning we had first period phys ed, and it was damn cold, at least for Miami standards in the wintertime. It was probably 50 degrees something, 53 degrees, which I know is not cold for most real people, but in Florida that was pretty damn chilly. And we were out there at first period about 7:30 in the morning, and as usual at Shenandoah Junior High, there were 3 tribes there. There were black kids, there were Cuban kids, and there were white kids. And we white kids were bussed in from places like Coral Gables and Key Biscayne, and we were like lambs in terms of our level of violence. And there were these Cuban kids that were giving me a lot of trouble. And we were playing basketball one day, and some guy got it into my face about something, and he threw he's right here, and he threw the basketball, and it hit me in the nose, and I punched him in the mouth. Just like that. I didn't think twice about it. You know, screaming, yelling, he threw this thing, hit me in the nose, and I punched him in the mouth. So we get off of the basketball court, and I spend the rest of the day thinking, oh my God, because this guy and I had not been, pals. He'd been giving me a lot of crap for a long time. And I thought, now I'm going to pay. Now I'm going to pay. He threw a basketball in my nose. I punched him in the mouth, and now he's going to kill me. He and his friends are going to get together, and they're going to kill me. And I met him outside of the auditorium, and he was like 3 lockers down from me. And he came and undid his lock, and I undid my lock. This was like the next day or something like that. And I thought, man, he's going to slit my throat. And I looked over at this guy, and he looked over at me, and he said, hey, how's it going? I said, okay, how are you? He says, yeah, cool, it's good. Off he goes. That actually happened to me, and I never forgot it, although I apparently have. But most liberals don't get it's such a bad habit. Even these progressives don't get the message. They don't have the look. I wish I could tell you it was the guts to hit this guy in the nose or in the mouth. I guess I wish I could tell you I had it all sorted out and said I'm going to go stop bullying today. I'm just going to next time this guy. No, he threw a basketball, hit me in the nose, and it hurt and it pissed me off. So I hit him in the mouth, and that was the end of it. That was the end of it. Not only did that guy never give me any more trouble, but none of his friends gave me any more trouble. As a matter of fact, they were kind of nice to me. And it was only, when I say many years later, I mean like 2-3 years ago that I began to realize what's going on here. That bullying is built into biology. It's not just a human activity. It's built into biology. There's a great story, I forget who told me this, but it's not a little story, it's just a simple anecdote, one of billions of anecdotes. But basically it was something to the effect of these mares were together, and this one mare gave birth, and this foal came out, and all the mares were around the foal, and they were nudging it and trying to get it to its feet, but there was something wrong with the foal. It either had a bad leg or it had a deformed leg or something like this. And the mares were trying to get this foal on its feet and walking around, and the stallion came up and took a look at it and realized that this foal was deformed. And the stallion just went in there and stomped it to death. Now that's horrible. And if you think I'm coming out in favor of bullying, you're wrong, because we're not animals in that regard. That's what makes us human, is that we're not animals. I don't think the weak should be stomped to death. On the contrary, that's what the Nazis think. That's what socialists think. No, I don't think that at all. I think the weak and the sick need to be protected. But biologically, what the stallion was doing was making sure that the entire herd was able to survive against predators, because it's not just that they would have to take... I'm not saying that the horses were smart enough to figure this out, but the genes were smart enough to figure it out, because millions of years of trial and error produced some pretty effective mechanisms. The stallion was wired to kill that weak offspring because the stallion's genes forced him to do it. It was a behavior that was encoded. It was an instinctive behavior encoded in the stallion's DNA. And the reason that behavior was encoded was because those stallions that didn't have it encoded were killed by predators because they not only had to take care of that one weak foal, they would have had to take care of all of the weak foals that foal had passed those defective genes onto. And it's only recently I've realized that human bullying is that mechanism activated in certain individuals. And what bullies are doing, bullies are attacking the weak. And they're not attacking the weak because they want their lunch money, and they're not attacking the weak because they would otherwise attack strong kids, but only weak kids won't provide any resistance. This is a relatively new insight for me. Bullies attack the weak because they're wired to attack the weak. And what bullies are looking for, biologically, genetically, is they are looking for somebody to punch them in the nose, because when somebody punches a bully in the nose, it deactivates the contempt and the hatred that bullies have for weakness. And you see this all throughout the animal kingdom. When I hit that bully in the lip, I won't say he became a friend of mine, but he not only didn't give me any more crap, but actually treated me with respect because he had assumed that I was weak and had to be destroyed. And when he found out that I wasn't weak, he no longer felt like he had to destroy me. And on some level, he probably thought, I misjudged this guy. He's stronger than I thought he was. I respect that. So, I don't like bullies, and I don't think bullying is good or necessary. But educating bullies will not work. It's not that they don't know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And when you go up to a bully and say, hey, here's all my lunch money, just leave me alone, that doesn't solve the problem. That makes the problem worse. That's more weakness. It's more submission. That's not what they're keyed for. And when you say to bullies, I guess this must have something to do with the fact that you have poor relations with your dad, or then they're going to hurt you worse. What bullies want is they want to be punched in the nose so that they can get on with their job of checking out the rest of the herd. And lots of people are terrorized by bullies, and I was one of them. And if I'd had the common sense to know that, if I'd had a better dad, frankly. Look, he told me this. It's not that my dad didn't tell me this. It's just he didn't tell me in a way that it got through, and furthermore didn't provide me with enough self-defense confidence to give it a try earlier. It's only when that basketball hit me in the nose that pain just kind of activated that response in me. I guess just how I'm wired. But there you go. What we need to do is we need to teach kids, the weak kids and the soft kids, we need to teach them that this is a test for them. And it's a test that they're going to have to pass. And the test is you will have to endure pain one time. I think that's really what it comes down to. Maybe not even pain, really. Maybe not even pain. You're going to have to show courage one time. Once you show courage one time, that'll probably do it. And I'm not the only person who's had this experience, and everybody who's ever had any comments with bullies, any experience with bullies will tell you if you hit them back, they leave you alone. It's not news. I didn't invent this. It's important. It's important. And you can't legislate it and around it, and you can't educate around it. You are stuck with it. It's in the genes. And so you have to respond in a way that deactivates those genetic commands, which is with some sort of strength. Even resistance. You don't have to be strong. You just have to resist. They want to kill the weak. You have to show them you're not weak. And that's it. You don't have to beat them up, and you don't have to threaten with hurting them. They're looking to know whether you are fit to survive or not. And you have to show them you are. It's not nice, but it's true. Excuse me one second. Small tradition here on the Stratosphere Lounge show. Well, let's see. I'm so sorry. I know this is awkward. Every second or third episode we get... oh my goodness. I love my job so much. 1 minute and 40 seconds into the show. I have to write that down. Okay. So much for bullying. I'm sorry. Yeah, that'll do it. Okay. So moving on. To answer the question, Ella, what kind of jerk thinks war solves anything? Ask the Nazis if war solved anything. Ask the Imperial Japanese believers in the cult of Bushido. Ask the Confederates. Ask the Gauls. You could ask the Saxons. You could ask the Aztecs or the Incas. Ask any of them. If you can find any, it solves everything when it's applied to its logical conclusion. I will agree that unfinished war not only doesn't solve anything, unfinished war creates more problems than an unstarted war does. If you're going to fight somebody, you have to beat them. And as my dad said to me when I was a little boy, for reasons that I could not understand to save my life, I couldn't understand it to save my life, but he said to me when I was 6, Bill, if you ever pull a gun on somebody, you have to shoot them. Not be prepared to shoot them, that I understood. He said, you ever pull a gun and level a gun at somebody with your finger on the trigger, you have to shoot them. And the reason you have to shoot them is because if you threaten somebody's life and you don't put them out of commission, they'll kill you. Took me a while to figure that out. I just got a request from Astronerd to see the propeller hat, which I may have handy. 1 second, excuse me. It's a special viewer request. Don't go anywhere. Astronaut, I don't seem to have it with me. I was given a propeller that goes. It turns any hat in any baseball cap into a beanie. It's a propeller. It's somewhere. I was looking on the floor over there in the corner because that's where the remains of my bag are. And the reason they're over there in the corner is because I threw my bag against the wall, and if I'd had a baseball bat, I would have smashed it with a bat and knocked it against the walls. That kind of day earlier today. I'll pick up all that stuff later. Your propeller is not in there. It's intact someplace, and I'll go looking for it. I probably took it out at home. But like I say, it was kind of a feral day. I think if I'd gotten that text earlier, I would have been happier. Anyway, so war does solve things when you fight a war to its full conclusion. Moving on. Boy, we're at what? Hour and 43. We still have 2.5 pages to go. This may be a 4-parter. By God, I did not want it to be. No, and it wasn't a booty call, by the way, Dave. Big booty. Or big bootay, I should say. It was not a bootay call. It was a compliment in the form of a photograph. Moving on. Alloconcert again. Back-to-back questions for the win. Ding, ding, ding. You get a free play. Why can't you just get with the times and admit that our Constitution has changed, that our living Constitution has changed? Once again, one of these arguments ready to pounce on conservatives for our rigidness and mean-spiritedness and our tininess of flexibility. That ain't true. Of course the Constitution changes. To the degree that the Constitution changes, it is a living document. But if you're going to claim that the Constitution is a living document in order to get your socialism, then unfortunately for you, you have to actually change the document. You don't get to just say that the document changes. You have to actually change the document. The founders, in their wisdom, did put in mechanisms to change the document. But you have to change the document in order to get the living document changes that you want. You don't just get to claim it's a living document and changes all the time and therefore I have all the power I want. If you want a constitution to give you authority for something that you think you deserve now that wasn't around when the founders are here, then yes, it is a living document. Yes, the Constitution can be changed. So get out there and change the Constitution, but you can't because you won't, you miserable, low-life, lying bastards. Right? Okay. Glad we got that out of the way. Those people who say we should, well, welfare is because the document's a living document, the Constitution changes all the time. The Constitution changes by constitutional amendment. If you want a constitutional amendment that says that we should give money from people who work to people that don't and in unlimited amounts, then go ahead and try and pass the 28th Amendment. I dare you. I dare you. I dare you. You can't. You want to repeal guns? You don't like the Second Amendment? You don't think that individual citizens should have the right to keep and bear arms? Then make the 28th Amendment say the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States is hereby repealed. Period. Do it. Because if you do that, then you will have the constitutional authority to do what you're doing without the constitutional authority. Yes, it is a living document. By all means, go out there and make your living document live and get the constitutional amendment you need. But you can't do it because you can't do it. You can't do it because you can't do it. So, that's the response to that, ladies and gentlemen. Is it a living document? It is. Are you in favor of it being a living document? I am, actually, even though horrible damage was done to this country as a result of constitutional amendments. And if you want to ask me which constitutional amendment was the worst, I will tell you it is in my mind by far the 17th Amendment. Thought I was going to say 16th, right? Thought I was going to say income tax. No. It was the amendment that made senators elected by the population and not by the states, because once that happened, the states no longer had any power to protect their own interest, and the federal power grab began apace. That was the worst thing we ever did in this country, was the 17th Amendment. But we did it, so now what we have to do is repeal it. Repeal the 17th Amendment. Get out there and explain to the American people. Are you saying that you don't want the people to elect senators? How undemocratic is that? I am saying I don't want the people to elect senators, and the reason I'm saying it is because it is undemocratic. Precisely correct, yes. The Founding Fathers, in their wisdom, provided a place for the people to have a voice, and it's called the House of Representatives. The founders, in their wisdom, also maintained large amounts of political power in the hands of the states because they figured that if they didn't, somebody would try to collect all the power over where the federal government is. Guess what? Guess what? That's exactly what's happening. So yes, do the people of Alabama, let's say, or Oregon have a voice? Do we have a right to canvass the people of Alabama or Oregon as examples for their input on politics? We do. And they can elect representatives to the House of Representatives, which is the people's house. But the state of Alabama has interests that are different necessarily than the people that live in Alabama. And the state of Oregon also has interests that are different than the people of Oregon. And by protecting the interests of the state of Alabama and Oregon, we protect the people of Alabama and Oregon from the powers of the federal government, which would be greater if the states don't have power. The 17th Amendment destroyed that. They destroyed the power structure separation in America, and it was a catastrophe, and we need to undo it. And frankly, that's what I think we ought to do. I think as conservatives ought to go out there and basically say, hey, you know what, there's two, we talk about the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, Fifth Amendment. No, there's two amendments that we need to be talking about. The 10th Amendment and the 17th Amendment. The 10th Amendment says that those powers not specifically allocated to the federal government are reserved to the states or to the people. That means to you or to where you live. That means that the people in Washington don't get to tell you everything about you or where you live. If you live someplace, you have a different say than somebody who lives someplace else. Don't you like that? Yeah, well, you should get the 10th Amendment memorized. And the 17th Amendment took the teeth out of the 10th Amendment, so we need to make that go away. We repealed prohibition. Let's repeal the 17th Amendment. And while we're at it, let's repeal the 16th. As a matter of fact, why don't we just have the 28th Amendment basically say we hereby repeal the 16th and 17th Amendment? Like prohibition, they were miserable, awful, terrible ideas by a bunch of busybody progressive douchebags who got in there and messed up things for everybody. We gave it a try, didn't work out. Okay, it's a living document, by God. Living document means we get to correct mistakes, and then we get to correct mistakes that were also corrections to mistakes. So off we go. That's it. Boom. Period. Okay. Jacob Belchak says, engaging liberal brain, which is his way of saying this is a sarcastic question, and good for you, Jacob. I'm embarrassed to ask these questions with a straight face myself. How can you be against welfare when the biggest recipients are corporations? Also, the states that receive the most welfare are under Republican control! Exclamation point. How can you be against welfare when the biggest recipients are corporations? First of all, I'm not sure that's true. I am I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying I'm not sure it's true that corporations get more money in welfare than the individuals in this country. However, let's say it is true. Once again, your progressive brain has decided that since you can't win the argument on the basis of facts, you're going to make an argument, put it in my mouth, and then defeat that argument. That's called a straw man argument. My answer to this is, how can you be against welfare when the biggest recipients are corporations? I'm against corporate welfare. 100% dead against it. I think it's evil and wrong. I think it screws up the economy. I don't think corporations have any business getting welfare. I don't think anybody gets any business taking money from someplace else to give to somebody else. Period. Full stop. End of discussion. You're waiting for your argument, aren't you? You're not going to get one. Of course, corporate welfare needs to be ended. Next question. I think we already talked about this in business, that the states that receive the most welfare are under Republican control. The states that receive the most welfare are states like Alabama, Mississippi, deep South states that have never gotten over the burden of slavery or the entitlement caused by the burden of slavery. That's why they get most of the welfare. I guess that's per capita. It certainly can't be the most welfare per dollar spent, but I have to look into it. These are relatively low population states that have a relatively high dependency issue and problem. And by the way, to say that they're under Republican control means that they're recently under Republican control. They're under Republican control because they were run into the ground. So there you go. Somebody just mentioned, Raphael Lebovitz just mentioned that I just posted something on Facebook about tax. Just coming off the tax thing, let me just say this. I thought this was one of the best answers I ever had, actually. I got a question on the show I do with Andrew Clavin at PJTV saying, what is the definition of a good tax? And I did 4 minutes on it, or 3, not counting the filler that Andrew does. Andrew has a couple of words to say. It just mostly provides filler and a chance for me to have a drink while he's talking. But basically what I said was the definition of a fair tax would be, what is the minimum amount of money required to run the federal government according to the enumerated powers as outlined in the Constitution. In other words, grab your Constitution, find out what the government is authorized specifically by the Constitution to do. That doesn't mean everything and not prohibited by the Constitution. What does the Constitution say the government can do, the federal government? Find out what those few things are, find out what they cost, and pay the minimum necessary to do that. That's the definition of a reasonable tax. Period. Boom. Simple. So moving on, Christopher Dale Goodwin says, why don't you conservatives care about poor people, single mothers, black people, Central American immigrants, etc.? I think by this point, when I took the questions, I just grabbing them. But I think by this point, to be honest with you, Christopher, we pretty much covered this. Keeping poor people forever poor is not caring for poor people. Making poor people dependent on the government for the rest of their lives is not caring for them. It's keeping them slaves. It's keeping them little pieces of wood that have to float down a river. We don't want them to be slaves, and we don't want them to be inert humans whose entire life consists of waiting for the next handout. We want them to be fully human individuals in control of their own destiny, which means in control of their own resources. We want them to be in control of their own resources. While I'm here, let me just demolish quickly this idea that conservatives or business people somehow like people being poor because that's good for low wages. Listen, a company is in business to sell things. That's why a company is in business. I know this kind of fundamental stuff just makes progressives' heads explode because they never heard it before. They think that corporations are in business to collect money for the rich people that run the corporation and enslave everybody else. No. Corporations are in business to sell things. That's what they do. Now, when you sell something, if you sell it for less than it costs, pretty soon you will not be able to sell those things anymore because you will not be able to maintain the operation. It's like an organism that takes in fewer calories than it expends. If an organism takes in 1,000 calories and spends 1,500 calories, that organism gets thinner. Sooner or later, the organism starves and then it dies. However, if you sell something and you sell it for more than it costs to make, then you can continue to sell things, and you can start selling better things, and you can improve the quality of things. You can add new things to sell. All these things happen if you sell something for more than it costs. So while it's wonderful to have low labor costs as part of the equation, what it ultimately says, society-wise, what we want is customers. In other words, there's no point in having cheap labor if there aren't any customers. And the richer people are, the more customers we have, the more money they have to spend on the stuff that we're selling. I'm speaking as a business person now. We don't want poor people in this country. We don't want any poor people in this country. Poor people don't help us at all. Poverty is not an asset. Poverty is not part of the manufacturing equation. If we could have richer people, or I should say, if we had people who had the kind of habits in life that made them rich, it is true they would cost us more in terms of manufacturing what we sell. But since we make a profit on what we sell anyway, a richer population means that we are actually making more money as businessmen. Don't you see, you idiots? Don't you idiots in the progressive movement see this? If we follow your argument to the logical conclusion, we business people like poor people because it means low labor costs, then that means that we can make our products less expensively and sell them to fewer people because everybody's poor. The less we sell them for, the less money we make. The more we sell them for, the more money we make. It's in our interest to have a rich population rather than a poor population, because even though labor is higher, labor is not the entire equation. The richer people are, the more they pay for our products. The materials don't change in price. The energy costs don't change in price. The amortization, the insurance, none of that stuff changes, whether the population is rich or poor. So while low labor costs may be good on one end of the balance sheet, it's never in the advantage of business people to have a poor population, because the poorer the population is, the less of our stuff they can buy. We don't want to sell less stuff. We want to sell more stuff, you idiots. Of course we want rich people. We will negotiate labor costs as low as we can get them because that's just good business. But when it turns out that, going back to your fast food example, if it turned out that every single fast food person in the country decided that we're walking out unless we get $15 an hour, then there's very few fast food companies that could afford to pay that, because now you'd have to start selling $20 hamburgers, as we said earlier, but there are probably a few that could afford it. Most of those people's jobs are going to be turned into automation. And so we'll still have low labor costs. You see, it's not so hard. We want rich people. Conservatives like poor people making money because, number one, it's good for business. But even better than that, we are, in fact, decent, moral people who work hard and would like poor people to keep the results of their work and get rich. Because I've been around poor people and I've been around rich people, and I've certainly been in poor neighborhoods and I've been in rich neighborhoods, and I can tell you which one I'd rather walk through. Right? This business that conservatives need poor people is the biggest lie that they tell. And the reason you can tell them that it's a lie is because you are not even... If we really are greedy, you got to at least follow the logical consequences of being greedy. And if we really are just nothing but money-grabbing, greedy bastards, then having rich customers is in our interest. Jacob Belchak, we're going to have to do part 4, by God. I've at least improved my mood, but we're at 2 hours and we're not getting done with this. These are all great questions, and I don't want to shortchange them. We'll do part 4. We're at 2 hours. I'll do the end of the page, and if I do the end of the page, that leaves me with a full page to go. You know what? I think we'll do this, and we'll make this the last question, because then we'll have 12 or 13 for the next one. And that will be the end of it. But by golly, this is great stuff and great fun. And if I do say so myself, it's really been a blast. So we'll end with this one, because this one's going to take a while. Jacob Belchak says, engaging liberal brain again. Boy, Jacob Beljack has engaged the liberal brain twice. I should have put those two together. He could have got the free play on the pinball machine. So speaking parenthetically and cynically, he says, why do all you right-wingers blindly ignore proven evolution and believe in a cosmic Jewish zombie? Well, let's start with the beginning part of that gigantic lie. First of all, not all right-wingers ignore evolution. I'd be curious to know what the percentage of people who call themselves conservatives are that do believe in an old earth and the theory of evolution, but I'd be willing to bet you it's a significant majority. Significant majority. Now, there are some people that don't believe in an old earth and that think that evolution is scientific fiction and that we can't know what happened millions of years ago. I could respectfully disagree with those people, but that wasn't really the question. Let me just say this, however. Speaking to my personal beliefs, not trying to convince anybody else of this particular point, but speaking to my personal beliefs about why I do, in fact, have a great deal of confidence in evolution and a great deal of confidence in a very old earth. We're not talking about whether or not there's a God, and we're not talking about whether or not he built the universe. What we're talking about is, if indeed God did build the earth and the universe, then he has constructed in it numerous, and I mean numerous, extremely repeatable, mathematically predictable elements of that universe to indicate that it is in fact very old, that the earth is 4.6 billion years old, that the overall age of the universe is 12 billion years, somewhere 12 to 15, somewhere in that ballpark. So while at one time I was arrogant enough to think I knew more than God or everybody else who lived in history, I no longer have that arrogance. But what I can say with some confidence is, if God did in fact construct this universe and this world, he has built into it multiple, interlocking, testable, repeatable pathways of evidence, not just individual pieces of evidence, but pathways of evidence to indicate that the world is in fact very old and that life forms have been evolving from the time they've been on the earth. And you get into things like radiocarbon decay indicates something, and redshift of galaxies indicates something, and you can follow the pathways of genetic gene structure and so on. And all these things not only back each other up, but they back each other up numerically, mathematically. They're indicating the same general age. It is true that we used to think the Earth was not as old as we think it is now, and it's true that science constantly adjusts itself. But the reason I have confidence in evolution and not in global warming is because it's not like we have a model for evolution, which is then showing constantly cases where the model and the evidence do not agree, and therefore we're assuming that the evidence has to be wrong. The evidence for evolution and an old Earth are orders of magnitude greater than they are for something like global warming. So, I'm not going to presume to tell God what to do or why he did what he did, but there are, in fact, expanding galaxies and expanding at a rate that indicates a precise time when they were all in the same place, and that these measurements are made thousands of times a year, if not thousands of times a week, and that they are consistent and repeatable, and they're built into the laws of nature that God presumably created. We have structures of sediment, we have structures of carbon dating, we have the evolution of bones over time where bones are doing things in certain directions, and all of this evidence is repeatable, and all of this evidence is built into the world. We didn't put those fossils there, we dug them up, we found them. Somebody put them there. They got there somehow. So, I think it's presumptuous. I am speaking for myself here. I think it's presumptuous to say that if these things are built into the structure of the universe in such a consistent manner, if this is in fact the creation of God, then God is trying to tell us something. And if he's lying to us on purpose, that's a little different. So the first part of your question, I'm not sure I buy, Jacob, that most right-wingers ignore evolution and an old Earth. I'm not sure I believe that at all. I do find that conservatives are far less likely to believe that that's all there is to it. And I was one of those people that believed that all there was to it until I started thinking about bigger issues than that. So now let's get to the idea of the cosmic Jewish zombie. I'm going to answer this question as a person who has extremely serious questions about resurrection of Christ. And I think that's about the limit of the box for me now. I would have told you before I thought the whole thing was just nonsense and drivel and the whole idea of a God was drivel and all this, but I don't believe that anymore. So, let's reduce it. It is extremely unlikely in terms of average everyday human events that this happened. The claim is that these were not average everyday human events. There's a lot of evidence that this stuff happened, a lot of first-person evidence that it happened, all this other stuff. I'm actually going to dismiss that argument because I don't know. I don't know. Faith is a gift for some people, and this is something I have serious questions about. So I don't know. But I will say something, and I think this something needs to be said to people like progressives who talk about Jesus and Christianity as the cosmic Jewish zombie. What I do know is history, politics, and how people behave. This is, to my utter amazement, the area of life that I've become a student of, and as a layman, I would say, have a decent background on. So I will tell you this. Belief in the cosmic Jewish zombie has created everything good in this world. Whether or not that man was resurrected out of the tomb, the belief that he was, and the things that he did say, there's no possible rational disagreement with what Jesus actually said and preached. That is not up for discussion. The only issue up for discussion is the resurrection. But what I'm saying is, since I wasn't there, what I am saying with a very high degree of certainty is this, is that the teachings of that man, coupled with the belief that he did rise from the grave, because if people didn't believe that he rose from the grave, then these teachings wouldn't have the power that they have. Those teachings, without question, are responsible for everything good and decent in this world. They're responsible for the internet. They're responsible for the fact that I criticize the most powerful man in the world every single day without any fear whatsoever for my personal safety. Those teachings and that belief are responsible for that. They're responsible for this chair that I'm sitting in. They're responsible for the prosperity that we have. They're responsible for everything. And you have to be trying very, very, very hard to not see that that is true. Because I tried very hard not to see that it was true. The fundamental breakthrough belief of Christianity is that there is residing within every individual human, because it's not got anything to do with how old the earth is. When it gets right down to it, we're talking about people. We're talking about people and people's lives. We're talking about people's lives and how they live people, whether we live under tyranny. When I say tyranny, whether we're shot in the head, whether your little girl is shot in the head or not, it's dependent on what I'm about to say. So I don't care about the age of the earth. None of this matters to me. Really, what gets right down to it is this. The belief, multi-part belief of Christianity is what allows all this to happen, and I'll outline them for you as quickly as I can. First of all, the idea that an individual person has an immortal soul means that a small child outweighs the earth, that a baby girl outweighs the earth, the history of the earth, that the belief, whether it's true or not, doesn't really matter, because the belief that a baby girl who's drowning in the river is worth more than the Andromeda Galaxy or any collection of inanimate matter. That belief that the divinity of every single individual human being carries makes individuality possible. If there is no uniqueness to a person, if that person is not unique and priceless. That's what the soul does. Because I'm not claiming that socialists or atheists don't understand that people are unique. Of course they understand that they're unique. And look, I'm going to get to this whole atheist business about morality of atheism in a second. But I'm talking about the power of Christianity here. The belief that an individual person is priceless is essential to our way of life. And furthermore, the idea that we have within us a consciousness, a conscience, a savior, a person or authority that we have to answer to whether we get caught or not. See, this is the thing. What Christianity brings to the world is it brings accountability of action that is not dependent on surveillance or coercion. I wish I'd wrote that down. That's what it brings. It brings a sense that you are responsible for decency and justice in your own personal behavior, whether people see you doing it or not. There is no darkness of night in Christianity. You don't get to do something that nobody found out about, as the mass murders in the Soviet Union and the rest of these places leads us forever and ever and ever. No. Whether people see you or not, doesn't matter. You did it, and you are responsible for it, and you're going to pay. That provides virtue in people. And when you have virtuous people who behave themselves and do the right thing, then you can have a society where people are left alone. And I could do this whole, and I'm not going to spend 3 hours on this, although I easily could. And when I say I'm not going to spend 3 hours on it, doesn't mean I can't do it. It doesn't mean I won't do it. It just means I'm not going to do it now. But basically, the fundamental aspect of Christianity is the primacy, the divinity of an individual person, which means that the state and all of its needs and all of its resources and all of its desires don't outweigh you at all. Nothing. Nothing outweighs you. I want to live in a society where if a kid is down a well someplace, or lost at sea, a person's out, had a sailboat sink in the Pacific. I want to live in a society where we don't ask what is a reasonable amount to expend on saving this person, or, well, it's just one of 300 million people, is just the masses. Whenever you hear people talk about the masses, you've got a genuine, absolute bastard on your hand. I like living in a place where somebody says, what do we spend to save this person who's out there in the Atlantic drowning? I like to live in a place where we say, we spend what it takes. We spend what it takes. We spend what it takes. I like to live in a world, and I like to be part of a military, or at least a country that has a military, that says, we've got a guy back there. He's wounded on a hill. How many guys do we send after him, knowing that those guys could be lost? We send as many as it takes to get him out. That's how many we send. I want to live in a world like that. I want to live in a world where soldiers will say, we've left 2 guys out on a hill. Who wants to go back and get them? We may all be killed. Everybody raises their hands because that person is priceless. You see, they're priceless. And I have done nothing but for the last 6 months. I have done nothing for the last 6 months with the limited spare time I have, but read about the Nazis and especially the Bolsheviks and the murder and the murder and the murder. And we say 6 million, 10 million, 12 million, 30 million, 50 million. It doesn't even break through our skulls what that means on a person by person by person by person by person basis. In the Lubyanka building in Moscow, people were lined up 5 or 6 in front of doors and shot with pistols as a factory every day and every night. Every day and every night. The murder, the ruin of lives, the people shot in front of their daughters, little girls taken out in a forest and shot in the back of the head. This is what matters, and nothing else does. Everything else, philosophy, how old the earth is, who really cares how old the earth is? We're in here, and we're not going to be here to find out. None of that matters. What matters is, does your child come home to you at night, or does that child get taken out in the back of the woods and shot by somebody in the back of the head? That's what matters. And a world where individuals are held in primacy, and a world where individuals are expected to behave themselves because of the standards of their religious beliefs, is a world that can create this country that I love so much. That's it. Now, atheists will say that you do not have to believe in Christianity in order to have morality, because they don't believe in Christianity and they are perfectly moral people. And they are 100% correct when they say that. They are 100% correct. There are people who have no religious beliefs at all who are absolutely 100% completely decent, moral people who make all the same arguments I'm making without any belief in religion whatsoever. I fully get that. I fully accept it. But the thing that they do not seem to understand is that their morality, which they may not be basing on a belief in God, is built into the society that birthed them, and the religion of that society is, in fact, built into the walls that birthed them. In other words, you can absolutely, without question, be a fully moral atheist in America today, but your morality may not be derived by your current belief in God, but your morality is without question derived from a society whose history has a belief in God, souls, individuality, and virtue. There's just no question about it at all. So to my mind, the issue of evolution is irrelevant to this discussion. I look at evolution as something that is fascinating and, without question, explains virtually everything about biology. And I don't think there's really much room for discussion on that point from the point of biology. The whole reason that evolution becomes a hot-button issue is because some people believe that the existence of evolution disproves the existence of God. I don't see how that's necessarily true at all. At all. I don't see it that way. And I see it, in fact, in the other way. I see so much evidence for evolution, as I do for things like an old Earth in astronomy and in physics and in radiocarbon dating, geology, and everywhere. I see all of this everywhere. And I ask myself, if this universe is in fact created by God, why did he put this evidence here? Why? Why? It's not for me to answer, because I can't answer, and neither can you. But it is for me to ask. It is for me to ask. Because the other question you have to ask is, why give me the power to ask? If God created the universe and everything in it, why give me the power to ask this question? Why give me the intellectual capability to set up the kind of activities and experiments that can in fact derive an answer? And then why build so much evidence into the actual world that provide me with a consistent, coherent answer to the question that I was given to ask in the first place if it's not true? There may be a great reason for it. Maybe the reason is to test my faith. That's entirely possible. I don't know. But I do know that to claim that there's no evidence for evolution is to not understand evolution. And when people say, oh, we're descended from monkeys, it's whenever I hear anybody say we're descended from monkeys, I know they don't know what they're talking about. That's just not how it works. And I don't like inaccuracy, and I don't like, I said before that I like to be where the evidence is. People say there's no evidence for evolution. That's just not true. It's just not true. There is tons and tons and tons of evidence for evolution. Tons and tons and tons and tons and tons. And that's why I believe in it. Because if there wasn't, I wouldn't. So there you go. In any event, this question is one of those questions like abortion, where you end up closing the show thinking all you've managed really to do here is to piss off everybody who's watching the show. But that's certainly not my intention or anything, or my obligation. I feel like my obligation to you as the Strata Loungers that you are, which has always been the Praetorian Guard of the people who enjoy what I do, my obligation to you is to speak the truth as I see it. To me, that's what interests you about me. I have a pretty wide background and a pretty wide set of perspectives. So that's what you're going to get from me, the truth as I see it. And I'm not going to pull it, and I'm not going to skew it, and I'm not going to cover it up. I'm going to tell you how I feel. Now, whether anybody else agrees with me in where I am, that's great. But at the very least, it hopefully gives you something to think about. So, God, the universe, and everything, pretty simple, really. Just sign them up, and I'll knock them down. We got another 12 or 13 questions to do, but we are now at 2 hours and 19 minutes, and I'm not going to 3 hours tonight because I think I start getting, I don't want to say bored, or just start losing energy and and perspective, and I get the feeling I've said everything I kind of need to say tonight. So, there we go. And I like the fact that people are arguing about things in the comment section. I like the fact that people are arguing about things about ISIS, and I like that they're arguing about evolution. The one thing I do notice is that when they argue about things in this comment section and on my Facebook page and formerly on my blog, people argue respectfully. They're not using the F word, and they're not calling people children or idiots. They're having a discussion about things. They're having a discussion about the things on the merits. And that's how I learn things, and hopefully that's how we learn things. But I'll tell you one thing. The one thing I can tell you with a great degree of confidence is you judge yourself by your friends and your enemies. And if that's the standard, I am the luckiest guy in the world. That is episode 81 of the Stratosphere Lounge. I don't know how we keep doing it. Will be episode 82 will be the final part. I swear to gosh, it will be the final episode of these questions. It's just a great, great topic, and I knew it was going to be when we got it started. I'll tell you one other thing, too, by the way. Our one-year anniversary is coming up of the website, and we are going to do a Mark II launch of everything. We're going to reboot everything. Likely we could get the new Stratosphere Lounge look up well before then, but I'm enough of a showman to know that if you make changes incrementally, nothing looks like it's changed, that if you're going to make improvements across the board, then you should unveil them with a bang, and that's what we're going to do. So we will have the new shows coming up, October 20th or so is the day. We'll get there before then. We'll have a new Stratosphere Lounge, which will be shot over there on that riser. But you'll notice we already have the lighting up, which even at this early stage, oh, don't call me a liar on my own show. There you go. We have the ability to do all sorts of groovy wonderfulness with and have all kinds of fun. And the giant Stratosphere Lounge banner will come from the white, out from the white, boom, little glowing bill will be over here someplace. We'll have the Captain Kirk's chairs. We built the riser because the chairs are awfully cool looking and extremely uncomfortable and also very short. And we'll put them up there too. I don't know what else to say at this point other than to say Hail Vectron. And we will see you in episode 80 freaking 2. Next time, as I said, we will have a pleasant surprise for you. We will have an answer to where all this stuff is. People do things behind the scenes that make me simply amazed and flabbergasted and full of kind of gratitude I can't even express. Those of you out there watching tonight know who you are. And next week, hopefully, we'll get a chance to tell the rest of the world the incredible work you've been doing and how much it means to me personally. See, there's a couple things up there that are already lit up, a couple of 4 new made pictures that weren't there before. I got 3 over here and I got another 3 over there. And we're going to get some wall-sized artwork coming in, too, again, out of lovely gratitude and incredible generosity of you people out there. So 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 20 seconds into this program, I think it's probably time to call it a night. That's episode 81 of the Stratosphere Lounge, the Tough Liberal Questions Part 3, and we'll do Part 4, and then we'll be able to go home and whip them out of their boots. Thank you very much. You guys be careful out there. Have a good night. And I will see you next week.